Hello and welcome back to Seconds Out. Ayman Khan here with my colleague Danny Flexen, reacting to the latest in boxing news, specifically British boxing news. We were scheduled to see a heavyweight rematch in the professional ranks between Anthony Joshua versus Dillian Whyte. That's now being curtailed with the latest news that Dillian Whyte has tested positive for performance-enhancing substance in his system, which sees Dillian Whyte removed from the heavyweight main event. Anthony Joshua now looking for an opponent to salvage that date. Whether Anthony Joshua fights next weekend, it remains to be seen. But the latest information is Dillian Whyte has again, it should be said, tested positive for performance-enhancing substances. Danny, I'll let you kind of set the table here in terms of the scarce details we have here and just reaction to receiving the news when you did see it.
I was actually quite shocked, which is strange given the recent events where we've seen fights fall through for these reasons not too long ago. Obviously, Ben Eubank being a recent example, and also White having certain issues in his past, one for which he was cleared. He obviously served the ban, 11 years ago now. His ban started 2012. So maybe shouldn't have been surprised, but actually, maybe because it's only a week to go, maybe because we're coming off a bit of a high with Spence Crawford in UA and so on, big fights seemingly every week. I was really surprised and disappointed as well. Not because I was especially looking forward to the fight, I definitely would have watched it. But I think just from a selfish perspective, our channel has been doing really well over the last couple of weeks. Crawford Spence and now with Jake Paul. And that would have been another huge week for us. We were all booked in to attend fight week and then a number of us for fight night. Got fairly good relationships with the people involved, and yeah, could have made a real even bigger event out of it. And yeah, it is selfish, I make no bones about it, but we'd have done quite well out of it, and it's a shame. But yeah, I mean, looking at the broader issues, Dillian Whyte, I've seen his statement. He can't explain it at all. He's in favour of this investigation. He said he was disappointed the fight's been called off without him being given any chance to look into it. I think that's a little unfair and perhaps even a little naive given his experience, because we've got a week to go till the fight. VADA have reported this to Matchroom today. How much time is he going to need to prove his innocence is going to take a lot longer than a week, but even to work out exactly what's happened, what he's tested positive for, all that sort of stuff, and how it might have got into his system, if it definitely was in his system when he got cleared previously. It was said that it was contamination by UCAD. So with a week to go, they had to cancel it, especially after all the negative publicity about trying to persist with Ben Eubank after the test had become apparent, and two tests, in fact, had gone the adverse way for Conor Benn. There was no way Matchroom, after that scandal, and Ben may still be completely exonerated, we don't know, but given all the stick they took at the time, there's no way they could have made this go ahead. And also, the Dillian Whyte, although he was later cleared of any wrongdoing pre the Oscar Rivas fight in 2019, again, Matchroom took a hell of a lot of stick, and rightly so, in my opinion, for not informing Rivas or his team about Dillian Whyte's adverse finding until after the fight. So, with all that history and with all that precedent, they kind of had to cancel it.
Mm-hmm. No, I echo your thoughts completely there. I think, like you mentioned, Matchroom have seemingly done the right thing, whether that's been, because of maybe the backlash they would have received if they'd continued on is another thing and up to debate. But in point, and to shorten my point, yeah, it does seem on the surface and the face of it, they have done the right thing. We'll just get to that White statement briefly. I'll read out a couple of lines from it. What Dillian has said in the aftermath of this news releasing, he said, "I'm shocked and devastated to learn of a report by VADA of adverse findings relating to me. I only learned of it this morning. I'm still reacting to it. I have also just seen that the fight is being cancelled without having any chance to demonstrate my innocence before the decision was taken. I confirm without a shadow of a doubt that I have not taken their reported substance in this camp at any point in my life. I'm completely innocent and asked to be given the time to go through the process of approving this without anybody jumping to conclusions or a trial by media. I insisted on 24/7 VADA testing for this fight, as I've done voluntarily and at my own expense for all of my fights for many, many years. This is not the first time that I've been reported as having an adverse finding for a substance which I have not taken." Just to kind of shorten the statement from Dillian. Look, Dillian, obviously here, you'd expect a fighter to come out and say, and maintain their innocence. It's actually pretty funny if you mirror it with the social media influencers seen a couple of days back. Actually, a fighter who fought called Virus actually came out and with his hands clean and said, "Look, you know what? I haven't and owned up to everything, but look, we'll put that to the side, and every case is individual." But Dillian Whyte is saying, "Look, he's never has tested positive or taken any substances in his career." You'd expect that from a fighter, Danny.
Yeah, I think the ban that he took, and it was a 2-year ban in 2012 for methylexanine, if I'm pronouncing it right, probably not. But I think at the time he'd said that he'd taken it unknowingly. I'd have to have a look at the case, but I think it was something to do with, some sort of product that he bought, didn't have the ingredients properly listed. And I think that might have even been accepted at the time by the body in question. So I think the general consensus was that the length of his ban was rather harsh. Um, so, but no one said it wasn't in his system. So maybe not intentionally taken because he didn't know it was in there, which is fair enough. The second time with Rivas, he's completely right. He said it's not the first time he's been an adverse finding's been reported for something he didn't do. And with Rivas, UCAD actually admitted that was the case. They said it was most likely due to contamination because he had a very small amount of metabolites in his system of steroids. And they said that because he done other tests around the VADA test that he failed, and they were all negative, very close in time as well to the other one, and because the amount was so small, it was almost certainly a result of contamination, which is fair enough. But to say it was contamination again this time, why would it only be Dillian Whyte this is happening to? It just seems like the worst luck, doesn't it?
Hmm.
Now, it wouldn't surprise me if something was in his system and it wasn't intentional or similar to the original ban that something's happened and he's taken something that didn't have an ingredient listed. And I really do feel bad for athletes who find themselves in that predicament. But I think there is a strict liability rule. You have to be absolutely certain, and it's not happening to every fighter out there. So I'm not sure how simple an explanation that is. But I think going back to my initial point, given no chance to demonstrate his innocence before the decision was taken, how close does he want Matchroom to have left it before one of the biggest fights of the year on the zone pay-per-view before they make that choice to either find a new opponent for Anthony Joshua, if that's what they choose to do, 7 days, not long, but there are a lot of heavyweights on the bill.
Hmm.
I'm not suggesting Johnny Fisher step up, by the way. But yeah, what they're in a kind of no-win situation there. How long could they? Not how long could they have given White to demonstrate his innocence, but how long does he need to demonstrate his innocence? It doesn't seem possible that he could do it in a week. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that seems ridiculous. So I think he must know deep down they had no other choice. That doesn't mean he's guilty, but it just means that Matchroom have done the only real option that was available to them.
I'll be honest in saying, like, the first thing that came into my head when I got this news or saw this news was, for whatever reason, I don't know why, but the first thing that popped into my head was John Jones. Before he returned to the UFC, he popped for performance enhancing substances, and it turned out to be that what the positive test was for was just the drug he'd taken beforehand for the first instance had just reappeared because it stays in your system and it comes out further down the line. Now, I don't know why that popped in my head, but that was just the first thing literally that popped in my head. But the burden of the proof is completely on Dillian's side. And as we've seen in previous cases beforehand, and like you're saying here, it's going to take longer than a week for all that evidence to come through, unless they've got some, smoking gun to completely clear Dillian of any wrongdoing here. But the likelihood of that is very slim at this point. But I suppose Dillian's kind of point here really is, and to a wider sphere, if you have someone who tests positive on 3 different occasions, whether they're exonerated or not, or whatever the position is, how likely are the public going to be, open to hearing your side and rather dismissing your side and not want to listen to it?
I'm sure there's loads of people out there who don't even realise he was ultimately cleared by UCAD in 2019. So in his statement where he says he wants to avoid a trial by media, I mean, I can say honestly, Dillian, and I've got a lot of time for you, but you've got no chance of avoiding a trial by media. You know the media better than anyone. You've never been a massive fan of the media, and it's going to be what it is. We'll be reasonable. We'll talk about it nicely, but not everyone will.
Mm-hmm.
People are going to make their assumptions. They're going to do their kind of ill-informed jibes, and that's just comes with the territory of being a professional athlete in the modern media world. It's a shame, And we try not to sink to those levels, but it's going to be there whether you like it or not. And the only way to get rid of it is to do everything you can to prove your innocence. But there's no way you're going to do that in a week. And the hope is that Anthony Joshua, if he does fight, wins, and then you still get your rematch. But the problem is, and I guess this must be in the back of Dillian's mind, AJ's already got a fight arranged for either late this year or early next year with Deontay Wilder. So if the rematch with him and Whyte doesn't happen now, that could be it over forever. Whyte's biggest available payday for the rest of his career could be off the table.
Let's talk ifs, and let's start with if, and let's start with the positive in the sense that if Dillian Whyte is able to clear his name and exonerate his name like he did the last time around, what are we saying about testing, and what are we saying about Dillian Whyte as a fighter?
It depends what the reason for the wrong or the faulty positive is. If it's contamination again, then that's an indictment on the testing process that it's happened to the same fighter twice in 4 years, and both times based on contamination. When Conor Benn stuff happened, WBC completely ruled out contamination as a reason, and that's VADA, a very reputable organisation. They use WADA accredited labs, but it has happened before. Clearly, in a UCAD test, they did find it was contaminated. They didn't find any proof of contamination. I should point this out. They just said it was the most likely cause because the amount was so low and the tests that surrounded the positive were negative. So, yeah, I mean, it's not, you can't rely on the testing procedure if Dillian is found completely, quote unquote, innocent. But the flip side is, and this is more of a moral judgment than a legal one, if something was in Dillian's system without his knowledge and it was something, a supplement or an ingredient that he had no clues in there because of the manufacturers not making that clear as they should, then do you consider him guilty or innocent? I would consider him innocent, but by the strict liability rule, he wouldn't be. And that's just the world we live in, unfortunately, as pro. I say we. I'm not a pro athlete, of course, but the world where the pro athletes live in.
No, yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, the burden would be on the pro athlete to ensure that wherever they're taking, as much as humanly possible, to understand what they're taking that goes in the system is above board and is cleared by any regulatory body who's testing for performance-enhancing substances. The other side of the argument then is if he is not exonerated and isn't innocent as he protests, for someone who's served a ban and then will be serving a second ban, this time round. What are we to make of Dillian?
I mean, yeah, if it's proved beyond doubt that, I mean, if it's in his system, but he can demonstrate, as I just kind of alluded to, that the manufacturers didn't take due care to promote the inclusion of this substance, in marketing and so on, then I would have a lot of sympathy for him. If that's not the case, if he's knowingly and willingly taking it, and I don't know if we'll ever know that anyway, but if we did, then yeah, it's a stain on his character and his legacy. But not only that, you've got to look at his career. So if he serves a second ban, it's probably going to be compounded by the first one, so it might be even longer. The age he is now, the fact that the Joshua fight would probably be off the table by that point, you'd imagine he'd retire. What's left for him to come back for? Especially, the only reason would be to vindicate himself, to prove he's drug free and to, prove that he can succeed without anything in his system. But aside from that, I think he's got plenty of cash. He likes spending time with his family. He manages fighters. He might just think, well, this has happened to me again through no fault of my own, if that's what he believes, and just be like, well, what's the point? Because he doesn't seem to enjoy much apart from the actual training and fighting. He doesn't seem to enjoy the media obligations and some of the other stuff that comes along with being a famous sports star. So if he's, got enough money to retire and something like that occurred, and with Joshua rematch or rubber match, depending on how you look at the amateur fight, off the table, you can understand him walking away from the sport, probably, with a sour taste in his mouth.
And let's talk consequences. In the last sentence of Dillian Whyte's statement, it says, "In the meantime, all I can do is express my extreme disappointment to boxing fans who will miss out on what was sure to be a great event. Boxing fans might still be in line for a great event if Anthony Joshua can find a replacement opponent. What's being mooted or whispered right now is the potential of Derek Chisora stepping up from his chief support against Gerald Washington to take on Anthony Joshua in the main event. A fight that you're happy with, Danny?"
I mean, at a week's notice, I'll take it. I'll still probably pay for it. But I mean, it's not a great fight. I don't think anyone will be picking Chisora to win. They've always been really friendly as well. Like AJ, because of the Finchley background, AJ's always really looked up to Derek. So a big narrative in the build up to the Whyte rematch has been we all want to see, not we all, but a lot of people want to see the spiteful Anthony Joshua, the gung ho Anthony Joshua of old. We're probably not going to see that against like a venerable statesman of boxing that he hugely respects. We're probably going to see more like a sparring thing, a bit like Tyson Fury with Chisora. You know, he took it easy on him because he gave him a bit of a beating, but he prolonged it. He wasn't overly spiteful, and I think we'd see something similar. So I would understand it and I would accept it because of the short notice and because Chisora's already on the card. And it's probably because of his name value. It might be their best chance of recouping some of the money they would have got for the Whyte rematch. I'm not sure I'd be that interested in watching it as a spectacle. I mean, the other option, I guess, is that you promote Hrgovic from the fight with Dempsey McKean. I'd be gutted for Dempsey for a start if that happened. But, you know, if they did that, then it's a much better fight. However, can you see Joshua under a new trainer, relatively still, in Derek James, who has just come off a loss with Errol Spence, taking a dangerous fighter like Hrgovic at 7 days' notice? I can't see that happening. So, I don't know. Joshua McKean, maybe. I mean, it doesn't sell amazingly, but it's been mooted in the past. McKean's, aggressive. He's ambitious. He thinks he can win. He's unbeaten. He's got a decent world ranking. I think I'd rather see Joshua McKean than Joshua Chisora.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's more likely that McKean or even potentially Gerald Washington gets elevated to the main event. Outside bets, potentially someone like an Otto Warren might get the call. Maybe Michael Hunter could be someone who gets the call. We spoke to Michael Hunter, who's been in the camp with Anthony Joshua, and said, look, he's more than happy to come in. Yeah, of course, more than happy to answer the
I
bounty
mean, so
call.
am I. If we're throwing hat names in the ring, I'm a heavyweight. No doubt about that. Not a heavyweight boxer, but I'm a heavyweight. I'll
Maybe
take whatever. I'll be cheaper than all the other guys as well.
maybe leave you for we need you for other things over here at Seconds Out as opposed to maybe promoting Seconds Out on the on your boots
If
at
he
the end.
dies, he dies. It'll be one of those.
But the real concern I think the boxing fans have is that this idea of Derek Chisora stepping in the ring. Look, they don't want to see Derek Chisora in the ring again for his health, and the idea of coming up against Anthony Joshua, who look, they might be friends, but a potential Deontay Wilder fight in the offing, I don't think Anthony Joshua will want to be too friendly with someone stepping in the way of that come the end of the year or the start of next year.
Yeah, people don't want to see Derek Chisora fight for his own good and all of this stuff. But then when he was added to the bill against Gerald Washington, who people probably think Chisora's got a decent chance against, it seemed broadly positive reaction. So it's like, yeah, we don't really want Derek to fight. We love him. We want to look after him. Oh, yeah, but he's going to be in a big fight and against someone he might beat and they'll be smashing lumps out of each other. Oh, well, that's all right then. You know, it's a tricky one, isn't it? I think as long as there's a market for Chisora, as long as he remains a name, people are going to be conflicted. I think there's probably people that are close to him that do know him well that are genuinely concerned about him and want him to stop fighting. You know, people that have maybe been part of his team in the past and think it's time for him to knock it on the head. But I think the public at large can be easily persuaded, especially with a figure that they've known and I'm not going to say loved because I think that is hypocritical. I think, you know, people enjoy Derek Chisora for bringing them entertainment, excitement. I don't think they necessarily have affection for him in every case. But yeah, I think if they think him and Gerald Washington are going to beat the ever loving, what can I say that won't get us demonetized, ever loving bejesus out of each other, then yeah, I think they'll tune in. But I don't think him against Joshua is a palatable prospect, nor is it anything like a 50-50 fight.
Yeah, Kaunaki just coming to my mind, or the fella that beat Kaunaki. I forgot his name now. He fought Daniel Dubois. Cusimano is a shout potentially. Putting a good valiant effort against Kaunaki to beat him. But look, I'm from my point of view. When I spoke to Robert Smith of the British Boxing Board of Control when the Conor Benn situation came out, I kind of said, look, is this kind of stuff kind of casting quite a bit of a dark cloud over British boxing as a whole? And Robert was kind of almost semi-offended by that and said, no, it's only a small issue, it's an isolated issue, and there's a lot to like about British boxing right now. But is there really? I mean, if you look at boxing as a whole, we've Errol Spence and some great fights and great fights to look forward to. But British boxing right now, not the greatest fights at the moment. And when it comes to big stars or people at the top of the sport, we're getting stories like this.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that a lot of this is down to too many, and I've said this for a while, too many TV promoters at the moment in the UK. And you don't want to complain about the opportunity to watch boxing virtually every Saturday night, but I will complain about it because it's diluting the quality of each show. You know, you got Wasserman now on Channel 5, then you've got the three big boys, if you like, with Boxer, Queensbury, and Matchroom. And they're all kind of competing for some of the free agents and the opponents and stuff for their stars, while none of their headline acts are going to be fighting each other anytime soon because of the war, not just between the promoters, but between their broadcasters that they work with. You know, we had that situation in the US for ages when you had Golden Boy, Top Rank, and PBC. And PBC kind of got around it by just signing everyone in each specific division they wanted to focus on and making them all fight each other, which wasn't a bad idea, to be fair. But at the moment in the UK, there's not many of our promoters who own, if you like, a specific division that they can match everyone against each other or are willing to. You know, instead you've got like light heavyweight, which is a great division domestically at the moment. Credit to Boxer, they're matching Aziz and Buatsi. But some of the other top domestic light heavyweights with other promoters, you know, Lyndon Arthur's with a different promoter, Anthony Yard's with a different promoter. So, you know, it's a difficult one, but as long as all these top promoters have a TV contract in the UK, they are in competition and they're not going to share talent unless it makes everyone involved a huge amount of money. And the only way that's really going to happen is in the heavyweight division. Outside of that, you know, it's very, very unlikely. And I understand what Robert Smith's saying about an isolated incident, even if you say Dillian Whyte, you know, the old joke is what, two isolated incidents, but you know, it is two out of a huge number of professional boxers in this country. The flip side of that is how many are being tested regularly. Because someone like Dillian Whyte, who can afford to and is in big fights, signs up to VADA, and as he pointed out in his statement, has done for years and pays for it out of his own pocket. If you're in a WBC top 15, they'll pay for the clean boxing program. But if you're not, and if you're in the lower levels of boxing in this country, or you're a prospect on the rise, or you're a journeyman or whatever, you know, mid-level English title, British title fighter, you're probably going to have to pay for VADA yourself. And unless you're getting big money from sponsorship and purses, you're not going to do that. And if not, then you're just getting the random testing from UCAD, which from what I've been told is very rare at that sort of level of boxing. Unless you're in the huge fights, you're not getting tested often. So not only is that can be seen as an invitation to cheat, but it also means that any bold statements about how the UK is doing well boxing wise in terms of anti-doping can't be taken seriously because we don't know how big a drug problem, if at all, there is in British boxing because the vast majority of boxers aren't being tested on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm. Well, we'll sign off with this unless you have any other points of discussion, Danny, to add to the mix. But a food for thought here. I remember interviewing Johnny Nelson in the wake of Amir Khan testing positive for performance-enhancing substances subsequent to his fight against Kell Brook. And I said to him, do you expect to see more of this happening in the sport? And he says, yeah, I expect to see much more of these positive tests happening in the sport, which is a very interesting and almost, you know, fearful thing to say for this stuff. Well, in a good way, it's, you know, these people who are, you know, being found to use those are getting found out, great. But what does it mean for the consequence of the sport? Remain to be seen. But yeah, I'll let you sign off with your final thoughts on the situation too.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the testing procedures are getting better. I think the amount of testing is going up, certainly at the top level. I think fighters feel a certain peer pressure and pressure from promoters and broadcasters to sign up for VADA now as well. So I think we are going to see more positive tests simply because I think more people have probably been using and abusing performance enhancing drugs than we've seen caught, than we've seen, you know, proven. So I think as the testing improves and becomes more frequent, we are going to see more people fail. That doesn't mean more people are using than they were before. It just means more people being caught. That's still not a good thing. But I guess the more people being caught, proves the testing procedures are working, and so becomes more of an effective deterrent, which is important. But also, it shows that the more often people get caught and they're seen in the public eye to be taking punishments for it, and we wait to see what the final outcome of this case is and whether a punishment is even deserved, let alone handed down. But the more that happens, as young boxers enter the sport and turn pro from the amateurs, maybe they'll think twice about taking some bad advice or however they ended up using a substance, because they know what the consequences are, and those consequences are laid down and stuck to.
Well, chime in with your thoughts below. Drop a like and let us know what you think. We'll maybe even pick those up in our first going live on Monday. Yet to fix a time just yet, but stick tuned into Seconds Out on Monday, and we'll be seeing our two happy faces talking on the sport. You about to say something there, Danny?
I might have the Joshua fight by then. I might be in camp.
You might be in camp.
I won't have a happy face, not until I get my check.
Either way, keep it tuned into Seconds Out for the good in boxing or the adverse in boxing, and we'll keep you up to date with all the details. Thanks for tuning in.